welcome to another episode of United for a Healthy Stoughton. My name is Stephanie Patton. I'm the prevention coordinator for the town of Stoughton, and I am excited to have a special guest with me today, Representative Ted Phillips. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with tell us a little bit about yourself, about, what does it mean to be a representative, all that good stuff.
Sure. I was going to say, I grew up in Sharon, right next door. I am a graduate of Sharon High School. I graduated in 2001. When I was in high school, I got very involved in politics and government, right?
Yep.
I ran for student council. I loved it. I had a great time doing it. I found that I really enjoyed helping other people. When I could affect policy and positive change for others, it gave me a real rush, and it was something that I had some skill doing. So.
Yep.
So I went to UMass Amherst, where I pursued my degree in poli-sci. Went into political science major, came out of political science major, and then went to look for work in government. I had a friend who had interned at the Massachusetts State House for a senator from central Massachusetts, and she had tipped me off that there was an opening that one of his staff was leaving, and so I threw in my resume, and I was fortunate enough to get a job there. I did constituent services in the Senate for 1 year, and then my state representative, who at the time was State Representative Lou Kafka, who represents the district that I represent now, he had an opening in his office, and so he came over and he said, you know the issues, you know the district, you're very involved locally. By that point, I had gotten onto the Sharon Finance Committee, where I spent 14 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I jumped at the chance to go work for Lou. And so I worked for Lou for 15 years. And sort of my role evolved as his role evolved.
Yep.
As he moved up in House leadership, my role changed over time from being just a legislative aide to being to helping run a committee, and then being the head of a division leader's office, which was at its largest staff of 5. So I had a really great time doing that. And then when Lou decided it was time to retire, I leapt at the chance to run for the seat. I was elected in 2020, and I've been a state rep ever since.
Awesome.
And I love it.
Yeah. Yep. It's so funny, thinking about, so your entire career path really has been since college at the State House, right?
Yeah, it was very fortunate for me. Like I said, I knew I wanted to be in government. I knew I wanted to work on legislative policy and do constituent services. That was something that I had a bit of a knack for.
Yep.
And so as a result, having an opportunity to go and work in the building and be able to not just to work in the building, but to grow in the building and have a number of different responsibilities working in the State House really benefited me well, and has given me a wealth of institutional knowledge that I'm now able to put towards my current job as a state representative.
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a fun fact about yourself. So
Okay.
now we know you've been in government for your whole career, but what's something interesting about yourself that people maybe wouldn't know?
Something that people probably wouldn't know.
But that you feel comfortable sharing.
Of course. Well, I was a theater kid growing up.
Oh, cool.
I was a theater kid at Sharon High School, and so I did theater, and I sang in the chorus. And so the fun fact for me is, I think it was the summer of 2020, I sang the anthem at Fenway Park.
Really?
Yeah, I got
didn't
to sing
know
with a couple of my friends. We did a small ensemble version, 4-part harmony, of the national anthem. And since we were playing the Toronto Blue Jays that night, I also got to sing the Canadian national anthem.
Oh my God.
So there's a little fun fact. I've been on the field
Okay.
at Fenway Park and sang the anthem for a game.
Oh my God. What was that like?
It was a rush.
Yeah.
It was really, really cool. It was not an important game. It was right in the middle of July. It was sort of those dog days of summer. But being able to go in and stand before a crowd of I don't know how many thousand people who are just getting in and getting settled for the game, and to be able to do that was really cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I've been on the field at Fenway Park, but only for a Spartan race. So there weren't people.
Yep.
You weren't standing there looking up at
Absolutely.
thousands and thousands of people. That's cool.
Yeah, it was wild.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow. Okay, this is why we ask fun facts.
There we go.
Because we learn really fun things about people. Okay, love it. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is it like to be a state representative? What happens in a typical day or a typical week, if there's such a thing?
So it's funny you should say that, because I would say that one of the best parts of my job is that we really don't have typical days, right?
Yep.
There's no sort of 9 to 5 where you go into where you're just going into the State House and then coming home. It's we constantly have a shifting schedule where I get to go all around both my district and the region. I get to tour businesses. I get to take site visits, go see programs that the state funds that, sort of see how they're working on the ground, get feedback from people. So there are some days where I am in the building all day, where we have briefings on different projects or different initiatives, and then sometimes when we're in a full formal session, I'll be in the House chamber voting on a particular bill or participating in debate. So the great thing for me is that it really is something different all the time, and a lot of times you think you know what your schedule is, and especially when you go into the building. Usually it takes about 5 or 10 minutes and you're completely off schedule, right?
Okay.
Something
Right.
something will happen, in not necessarily a crisis, but something that requires your urgent attention, and then as a result, it winds up pushing everything that you thought you were going to get done off to the side while you took care of this, and then you could go back and do it. So it always keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, and what are some of the kinds of things that constituents like call and ask you about? Like, what are some of the strangest things, and then what's sort of maybe typical, or the kinds of things that you can help with?
It's a great question. So I would put them sort of into two pots.
Yep.
The first pot is sounding off on legislation. There are 7,000 pieces of legislation that get filed every session, 7,000 bills. And obviously it is very hard to know what matters to people. Fortunately, constituents do reach out either by email or by phone, some even by text, to say that they are in favor or opposed to a particular bill.
Yep.
So that is usually on the legislative side. On the constituent services side, when people have issues with a state service or a state agency, where they are perhaps supposed to be getting a service or entitled to a service from a particular agency, and that's not happening, it's our job to step in and sort of troubleshoot. So people will call and say, something to the effect of like, oh, I applied to renew my license. It was supposed to be here 3 weeks ago, and I need it because I'm, flying on a plane.
Right.
I'm flying on a plane in a few days, and I'm going to need that at check-in. And so things like that, it'll be our job to reach out to the RMV. I have one aide. Her name is Brittany Aliotto. She's fantastic.
Yep.
So Brittany or myself would call over to the RMV in that circumstance, find out what had happened, why there was a delay, why something wasn't processed, and see if we can fix that and get the constituent whatever they need.
Yep. Are there weird things that happen that you're allowed to share?
Weird things. I mean,
or unusual, maybe.
I don't think it's anything particularly unusual about some of the stuff that we get. A lot of times, there's some confusion. There are certain things that we can do at the state level that we can't do at the federal level. So I wouldn't call it weird, but sometimes we get calls from people who, perfect example is people who have issues with their passport.
I was just thinking that
Right.
when you said license, and I was thinking
Exactly.
passport. Yeah.
And so passports are always notoriously difficult, during processing and things like that. Unfortunately, that's a program run by the Department of State, which is a federal program and not a state program. And because it's a federal program, basically they don't take our call. If I called and said they're having a problem with their passport, they'd say have your U.S. representative call, not your state representative call.
Yep.
And so it's our responsibility at that point to kick it up to in Stoughton it's Congressman Lynch, to kick it up to Congressman Lynch's office so that they can intervene on the constituents' behalf to iron out the problem.
Yep.
But that's just it. It's basic. Sometimes the civics gets confused.
Yeah. Yep.
And people just call the wrong level of government.
Right.
So.
I remember a time where your predecessor came in and sat with some Stoughton High students, and we talked about. I think you were probably there. We talked about, what changes would they like to see, and we sort of sorted them into like, okay, this is a local thing, or this is something that the state would look at, and could be a bill that would be filed, and this was something that would happen at the federal level, and it's confusing sometimes for people.
Oh, it absolutely can.
Yeah.
It's tough to track.
Right.
It's one of those. I work in government, and sometimes it can be confusing. You know what I mean? So we certainly don't fault them, for calling the wrong number. But it always kind of stinks when you can't be the one to help, and you have to be like, I'm sorry, you have to call somebody else.
Right.
So.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about that. You've been a supporter of our prevention work here in Stoughton, and for a long time. So you've been at our meetings forever.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
feels like, or at least as long as I've been here.
Sure.
So can you talk a little bit about why, like maybe personally, prevention is important to you, and also just sort of in your role? Why do you keep coming to those meetings? We love it. Don't stop coming to those meetings. But like, why?
Don't worry,
Yeah.
I have no intention of stopping. For me, it works on a number of levels. In Massachusetts, we know that we have a problem with substance abuse, right? The opioid crisis which has evolved over my lifetime, has gotten worse and worse and worse. We think, based on the data, that there was a slight pause during the pandemic, but those numbers have come roaring back, right?
Yeah, yep.
We have a real problem, and we're losing friends, we're losing neighbors, we're losing, I'm losing constituents to this. We need to be doing everything in our power to combat this scourge, and one of the best ways to do that is to invest, the time and the resources in prevention coalitions like Oasis. Coming to the meetings, working with other people, doing everything that we can to get to sort of the root causes of substance abuse, and educating people as early as we possibly can, so that when the time comes where they're confronted with a terrible, terrible choice about using or not using, that perhaps we can, perhaps they have the right data or the right information to make the right choice. Right. So for me, the work that Oasis does is key to stopping that. We can write every law that we want that says, these drugs are illegal and you can't do them and things like that. But we know that we know that the people are going to use. And so it's the question of how do we effectively bring that number down to as low as possible. I'm not naive. It's never going to be zero. Right. But if every step closer to zero is a good step, which is why I believe so much in the mission of Oasis and keep showing up to the meetings.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a nice example too of like all the different partners coming together, and so we always appreciate, because you're always able to share with us things that are going on at the state level that might be impacting what's happening locally, and then we can sort of share up like, here are some of the things that are happening here. Is this a trend? You know, are you hearing other folks talk about some similar things?
And that's incredibly helpful to me, because that's also something that I can take back to the State House with me, right? Knowing what's going on the ground in my district, being able to compare that to other representatives' districts, being able to talk to my colleagues in the House and the Senate and saying, this is what I'm hearing, and this is what we're seeing, and here's the data. Being able to compare that data to other places, to understand where usage rates are higher, where they're lower, getting to the reasons why they're higher or lower, so that we can start moving towards lower if there's an opportunity. Being able to do that's how we craft good policy, right? Right. Is to have that on the ground look and view, and to be able to bring that back to the people who write the bills and the laws, to say, hey, listen, this is what we're seeing. This is how we need to be better.
Right, right. And I think even just sort of that idea too around, so not just that perspective, but all of the other perspectives that get to come into that room in the coalition model is, and as we can sort of grapple together with these issues, because I think, as you were saying, it's not an issue that could be solved by like one entity or organization, or like parents aren't going to be able to do this by themselves. They live in the context of society and the community and schools and law enforcement and government, and so how do we all, what pieces can we all take on to try to deal with something that's so complicated?
I totally agree. And it's one of those things that makes the coalition model so successful. It's that when we sit down for our Oasis meetings, we have a wide variety of experiences and experts in that room, right? You've got the legislators, you've got we've public safety, we have law enforcement, we have nurses, we have teachers, everybody who is going to be affected or perhaps has a chance to affect somebody who is considering using, they're in that room. And so being able to combine those opinions and share those thoughts is really just invaluable.
Right, right. So let's talk about like some of the things that are happening kind of at the state level around substance abuse, and we'll try to stay neutral.
Sure.
And just for information for people around the kinds of examples of the kinds of bills and legislation that you guys have to think about and deal with. So can you talk about a couple of the things that are kind of percolating and people are talking about right now?
Absolutely. So in the field of substance use and prevention right now, there's a couple of initiatives that are underway. As you know, back in 2020, we had raised the age of tobacco usage to 21. It was called the T21 initiative, where we also banned flavored tobacco and all that. So that includes vaping products.
Yes.
And vaping products are still quite prevalent in our society, right? We have outlawed them for people under 21. It has not stopped them from using them.
Right, or finding them.
Or finding them, right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we are grappling with up at the state is how to increase sort of the enforcement of the law that we put on the books. So what we want to do is that, we want to, quite frankly, put more, I don't want to say troops on the ground, but enforcement personnel who can root out some of the places that are illegally selling the flavored tobacco products. I've heard anecdotal stories of people who go into a convenience store, and if there are, if you say the right
Secret
phrase,
word, yeah.
then the box comes out
Yep.
from under the counter. And so, being able to crack down on that is going to be so important moving forward. One of the other things that is sort of on people's minds is there is an initiative for a ballot question making its way through the process and possibly onto the ballot to legalize under medical supervision, legalize the use of, I'm going to screw up,
Psilocybin.
Psilocybin, thank you.
Yes.
Or mushrooms.
Yes.
More
Yep.
commonly known as mushrooms. So, that initiative is making its way through the legislative process, and we're going to be seeing that play out over the next few months. The legislature has an opportunity to take a look at it, decide whether or not they want to, or whether or not we want to act on it and pass it into law as it's currently written, or whether it should continue to make its way towards the ballot. If the legislature decides not to act, what will happen is that the people who are in favor of the ballot question will then have a certain amount of time to collect more signatures. I forget how many, I think it's almost like 180 signatures, 180,000, excuse me, signatures
Yep.
to then put it on the ballot.
So can you, for a process question?
Sure.
Because I think that maybe is confusing for people too, like how things end up on the ballot. Because we've seen lots of things, actually a lot of substance abuse related things over the years end up on the ballot.
Sure thing.
So people who are interested in something write an initiative, and that goes through the Attorney General's office for sort of vetting for legal language and stuff. And then what happens?
So what will happen is if somebody wants to put an initiative on the ballot, what they'll do is they'll first, get, I think it's only about 10 people who will sign the initial petition,
Yep.
right, with the proposal for a law.
Yep.
That, as you said, goes to the Attorney General's office, and they will take a look at that language and make sure that nothing in that language is against the Massachusetts Constitution, that it's written correctly, that it's formatted correctly, that if it passed, it would be legal.
Okay.
And so once the Attorney General finishes that review, she signs off on it and says, I found this to be correctly drafted. It can move forward in the process. Then people have a window to collect a certain number of signatures in order to pass the first hurdle,
Okay.
If you will, of moving towards the ballot. They collect those signatures. A lot of people you see standing out in front of grocery stores,
Right,
things
with
like that.
those
Hey, please sign.
clipboards, yeah.
Right? Would you please sign this petition? So they sign the petitions. Those who meet the signature threshold, then it goes before the legislature, and basically the Attorney General has certified that these petitions are valid, and that the Secretary of State certifies that they've reached the initial hurdle of signatures. Then we get to take a look at it, decide whether or not we want to take action on it. And if we don't take action on it, like I said, it moves towards another round of signature gathering. That wraps up, I think, late May, early June. And then if the proponents get their signatures, they have a ballot question.
Okay.
And so usually you start off, there's usually something like 30 questions that
Right.
start off in the initial process. And then by the time we really get down to the ballot, it's usually 3 to 5
Right.
questions every 2-year cycle.
Yep. Yeah. And so if the legislature were to take a question like that and act, could they take any question? We don't have to talk specifically about that one, but any question and say, our action is we think this should go away. Is that an option, or all they can do is sort of take it and say we want to modify it, or we want to just pass it so we feel like it doesn't need to go to the ballot? What are their choices?
They can pass it, or they. I keep saying they.
Right.
It's we. We can pass it or modify it from the form that we get it. But we have to take substantive action on the legislation itself. I don't believe that we have the option to straight out reject it.
Okay.
But you
could just pass, and then it would.
We could pass
it would go to the
or
voters.
we could amend it.
Yeah.
If we did one of those two things, it would then not go to the voters. It would just become the law of the land.
Yep.
And so that actually has not happened quite a bit. In my lifetime, I don't remember the last time where the question got to the legislature and it wasn't acted on. There was an issue when we did paid family leave a few years ago. That was sort of a threatened ballot question that provided the initiative for people to get in a room and negotiate a compromise. So a lot of times, sometimes just the threat of a ballot question will be enough to force action on the issue. But a lot of times when you have, like I said, when the ballot initiative, the signatures are collected and it's before us, it's usually likely that it's because the legislature has made a conscious decision not to take action on it, which is why they usually don't moving forward.
Right. So in that circumstance, so those two, actually, you have a third one you want to talk about, and then let's talk about if people have, want to get more information about any of these, like where they can get that and how, if they have opinions, they could act.
I have the third, and I'm completely blanking on
we were talking about safe injection sites.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Safe injection sites is the third issue, and that one is, so we have a coalition of medical personnel who are very actively endorsing the establishment of safe injection sites in Massachusetts. This would follow the European model, most commonly found in Amsterdam.
Yep.
When people think of safe injection sites, where there would be places for people who know that they are going to use, can do it in a safe and supervised space, so that it reduces the likelihood of an adverse outcome like an overdose, and it would also provide opportunities for medical professionals who staff these safe injection sites to get in front of these people, to talk to these people, to provide them with literature and other information as they're coming in about usage, about the harm that they could be doing to themselves. There's a lot of reticence up on Beacon Hill about this one. It's one of those things where I think that there is great data coming in from Europe. Like I said, the Dutch model has proven to reduce overdose rates in a statistically significant way. But I think that there's still some people who are uncomfortable. It really comes back to the philosophy. It becomes a philosophical argument really about whether or not establishing a safe injection site is condoning said behavior, right? Whether we should be doing everything we can or investing all of our resources in prevention, or should there be some carved out for acceptance that we can't fully stop the behavior, and therefore should we try to make it as safe as possible so that people aren't killing themselves?
Right.
I mean, particularly with the lethal levels of fentanyl that are in our society, are prevalent in our society right now. There is an argument to be made. The jury's still out. I'm still.
You're doing the research.
I'm doing the research, right?
Yep.
I'm trying to learn as much as I can about it before it comes for a vote in the House. I don't anticipate it coming for a vote all that soon, but at the same time, it is a conversation and a topic that is picking up steam.
Yep. Now, so if people have like strong feelings or opinions about any of the things that we have been talking about, where can they get more information kind of about both sides of the issue? And then how can they make their voices heard, should they want to?
That's a great question. I mean, so obviously,
aside from voting, I guess
right,
the
I was
ballot
gonna
question
say,
goes to
when
the
we,
ballot.
When we talk about a ballot question, you have to get out and vote. You have to participate in the process. There will be policy on the ballot that you have an opportunity to sound off on, and that's a fantastic thing. As well, you should. When it comes to bills that are before the legislature, I would encourage everybody to reach out to me. I represent half of Stoughton. Representative Bill Galvin represents the other half of Stoughton. But we don't view it as like that's his half and that's
Right,
my half.
that's my
right?
street.
Right, exactly. It matters for the purposes of voting in that you can only vote for one representative. But when it comes to how we feel or how we approach the job, I represent half of Stoughton, therefore I represent Stoughton in the legislature.
Yep.
And so, if people have any concerns, what they should do, or if they're in support of a particular issue, reach out. You can either call us via on the phone. You can email me directly. I check my own email, and Brittany helps as well.
Yep.
But reach out and let us know. You can go to MA Legislature, all one word, malegislature.gov. My contact information, Representative Galvin's contact information, and Senator Timilty's contact information. Senator Timilty represents all of Stoughton.
Yep.
Is all on that website. And so it's so important for us when we're considering policy to know how our constituents feel about that policy.
Right.
And so, to take a few minutes, and even if it's like a 2-line email, it really does help. It really does help us in terms of getting a feel for how our constituents feel about a particular issue.
Great. I think that's super helpful for people to know. So that's your opportunity to make your voice heard.
Absolutely.
And share your opinion. So somehow we're already like in the last minutes here,
That's
which
wild.
happens every time. And so are there any other things you want to share with folks or that we haven't talked about yet that you feel like I really have this burning thing I want to say?
No, I just want to say thank you, Stephanie, for the work that you're doing right now. We've got a really great opportunity to make some real positive change here in Stoughton. The work that we're doing with Oasis is really fantastic. I'm really excited. I know that we've got a survey that's going out very, very soon.
Yep.
I'm very interested in seeing how that comes out. Be able to dive into the data. So we've got some really, really good initiatives coming up with Oasis. The table talk, the table talk stuff that I've used those cards with my family.
Yay.
It's been fantastic. So I would just say, keep up the great work, and thank you for including us and having us as the legislative delegation be a part of this effort, because it's really helping us up on Beacon Hill.
Yeah, great. And I want to thank you both for being here today and having this conversation, which I think hopefully is really instructive for folks at home, but just for your support over the years. I know I have called you about a number of questions, things that have come up where, I'm trying to also figure out like, where do these decisions get made and how do we get this information? And I know you've helped me sort through some things that have been confusing in the past to make sure we're acting on the right info here in Stoughton. So I appreciate that, and thanks for being on the show.
Always happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Great. Have a great day, everybody.